Welcome to the Produce on Purpose podcast, where we experience life being the real you. Oh, today we have a wonderful guest. We have Rebekah Scott. She's a Midwest mama, a serial entrepreneur, a host of the Encourager podcast, a designer, and founder of Handmade Purses and an accessory brand for 15 years. She also is a coach of moms committed to helping them thrive on their multi-passionate lifestyle without hustling. Rebekah, welcome to the Produce
Hey,
on Purpose podcast. How are you?
hey, good. How are you? Thank you for having me on today.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have you come on and share some of the great tidbits of wisdom that you have learned over the years. And I love the idea of not hustling. So share with our audience a little bit about your journey and also what you want to share with our audience today and who you are.
Well, you listened to the bio and you thought, okay, wait, we're a wife, I'm a mother of four, I'm an author, I'm a podcaster, I'm a coach, and then I'm also a designer. So it's like, ooh, that's a could be intimidating, but I hope that's not. And if you guys start recalling your roles, they're probably of equal time or of equal value. Like you may say teacher, volunteer, homeschool teacher, whatever it might be, mother of special needs. Like you have a lot of roles too. And so I always challenge like, wait, don't lose track because you're all handling roles that have equal value of what I am doing as well. And so I set out to, when people hear that, then they go, wow, she just must, sleep 4 hours a night and she's got this and this and this. And some of those things, yes, but not sleeping 4 hours. I don't hustle to get all these things accomplished. And I set out to like keep telling people how to do it without that hustle factor that so like naturally comes to us. I think both as male and female, we're like, well, we'll just hustle harder. And if you've tried that, which I have, you burn out so fast, right? And so something ends up not spinning in the air, the plate, if you will. And so I set out to create systems so that I didn't have to have that hustle mentality, but I could still have those amazing roles and those jobs and those goals that I wanted to set out and do.
It's amazing what we can accomplish, and you can do it with a different mindset, a different way of approaching. And I really do love talking about not having the hustle mindset because many believe that is the only way to have the successes that you want, the defined successes and everything else.
Yeah.
So as we jump into this conversation, how did you get here? How did you get to a space where you were saying, I don't want to hustle anymore?
Right. So I have a very distinct memory, if you will, or moment that happened that I thought, oh my gosh, God, thankfully, sometime hits me with a 2x4. And this was that moment. Started my business, was just as old as my son. He was 18 months old, and my business was about 18 months old. So that really is the hustle period of starting a business. Under 2 years, you're like, I'm gonna try this, I'm gonna try this, I'm gonna try this. So it's very hustling. And the first 2 years of a kid's life, especially your first, feels like hustling too, right? You literally are surviving on less sleep and you're trying to figure out this whole human being, right? So it was a hustle period then, and I was running in and out of our farmhouse, which is like 145 years old. So I want to say that to picture like, okay, so there were some things that were failing in the house, like there was no air conditioning at the time. We were trying to figure that out, and we were just making things work. So it felt like we were making things work for the child, we were making things work for the business, and we were making things work for the house as we kind of hustled to figure out what it meant. I was running in and out of the house to get purses packed for a show. Here in the Midwest, we call them like craft shows or art shows or markets or whatever they might be where you are, where I would have a tent and all of my things under it and people could come and buy. So I was loading up our minivan and the minivan door was dinging. My cell phone was dinging. We had a landline at the time that was going off and the emails were dinging on my computer because I didn't want to miss a thing, right?
Yeah.
And my son kept tugging on my sweater every time I would run past him with something to put in the van for the show. And he kept tugging on it and saying snack. And I kept telling him the infamous word is like, just a minute, just a minute. Well, I bet he said it, or he asked about 5 times. And one of those times when I was running and listening to all these notifications, I lost it as he tugged my sweater. And I yelled at him, stop. And to this day, I can picture his little blue eyes welling up and like wondering why mommy was overreacting to a simple request for a snack. and I hit my knees. It was just such a like visceral reaction to like, why am I exploding at this tiny kid?
Right.
And so in that moment, I got him the snack because, toddlers do not forget their snacks. And then I basically sat in the fetal position and sobbed and thought, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do both work and home life? And I didn't get the message in the moment to quit. And some
Hmm.
do, and that's valid, but I didn't. The message that I really felt strong about is I want to do both, God. So I surrendered to how can I do this? How can I
Hmm.
do both? So in that moment, I did something drastic at the time, but I know it was what I was supposed to do. I canceled the show, which for someone's like, oh, big deal. It is a big deal in the art world because they will not have you back because
Right.
you're flighty, so to say. They didn't invite me back for 6 years. So funny story, they didn't. But I canceled the show and then I said, okay, God, how am I going to do this? Help me figure this out. Well, I had had some experience with journaling a day because I was trying to figure out while he was nursing how this worked. Like, did he
Hmm.
eat? I was like, there's got to be a pattern to this kid because I'm a detailed person. I'm like, I got to figure this out. So what I did was start journaling for 7 days. I carried this notebook with me everywhere and I journaled what I did every minute mostly. Like I wondered like, okay, well, how long does it take me to get him a snack, to get him up, to run in the morning, to do my devotionals, to check email, to sew the purse, to design the purse, to cut out the purse. Like I just wanted to know what was I doing in a week
Right.
because I didn't want to have that scene again. And so after I got done filling out this journal for the week, I was able to zoom out, look at the journal and go, okay, here is where I'm working. Here is where I'm taking care of my family. Here's where I'm feeding everybody. Here's where I'm
Hmm.
trying to take care of this old farmhouse. Like I could zoom out and look, and I realized that there was about 5 pillars or 5 systems. And one of them I called the me system. That's when I was taking care of myself and I was still trying to go for a jog or read my Bible or take a bubble bath. Then I
Right.
realized there was a home system. That was
Hmm.
like, when was I cleaning the house? When was I doing laundry? Then there was a family system. And that was like when we did things as a family, creating traditions and living out our values that we had set out. Then there was a work system. And that's like when I was working, like who I was working with, what I was working on. And then there was a food system, and that was like answering the question, what's for supper? And by the way, the food system, I had no idea how much mental bandwidth took on that because I even journaled like thinking about supper, thinking about
Right.
supper, thinking about supper. And so once I could see, like, okay, then I highlighted when they fell in those areas, and I was like,
Hmm.
okay, this one is taking up a lot of space, this one is not. And then I could at least approach one system at a time, just one
Right.
system at a time. And I was like, well, which one is the most broke right now? It was definitely the work system because I had this moment with Gus that I was like, I have to figure out work better because I can't do this to him again or to myself.
Hmm.
And so then I just started working on each system individually until I got kind of a rhythm that didn't involve hustle.
That's really awesome. So it's almost like you fell into
Yes.
inventory of your life, and
Yes.
I've heard this before of saying, "Hey, take a inventory of all of the different things that you may be doing in a
Hmm.
day," and many times we'll find out maybe where we're spending most of our
Yeah.
time, maybe where we could be more efficient or
Yes.
effective.
Both,
So you
right?
kind of
Hmm.
ended up doing that kind of on a out of the idea that your son, you want
Yeah.
to make sure that you're
Hmm.
not going to affect him in that particular way, which kudos to you, mom, for
Yeah.
doing that. Because, sometimes we have so much weight on us, so many
Hmm.
things happening at one time that
Hmm.
sometimes we're not aware of maybe how we're affecting everybody else because we're doing all of
Yeah.
these different things.
Yeah.
So, as you pointed that out, I heard that you went through this process. You ended up having these 5 areas that were there. It sounded like work was a key factor that
Hmm.
you kind of figured out that was in there. Can
Hmm.
we dive into one of the areas and how
Sure.
you ended up kind of making a change or
Okay.
shifting the area that you felt was really kind of out of whack?
Yes. So if you do in fact do this, like you listen to this and you're like, I'm going to look at each 5 of these systems. I would say like find out which one is the most broke because you're not going to do all 5 of them. So for me at that moment, I realized the most broke one was my work system because I was still like, I'm Midwest mama. So like we also farm and ranch, you guys. So we quite literally have chores and animals. So those things were running smooth because you have to feed the animals, right? But my work system, I was like, I can't continue to work at it at this level for much longer. So I chose that system. And what I did was just answer the questions: who, what, when, where, why, and how. Okay. So that who is going to help me keep doing this? Do I actually need to hire an assistant maybe? Like, do I have enough income to hire an assistant? So I started asking myself the who. Then I started asking myself the what. Well, what am I doing? I'm sewing purses and accessories. Is there any part of this part that I could hire? Or am I like overproducing? Like, do I actually need to have 100 purses for the show? Or am I just overproducing and I can actually show up with 50 and have them order 50? Then I asked about my where. Like, okay, well, the where of my work system. Is my tiny, and it didn't at the time, is my tiny room in this farmhouse big enough for, first of all, my dreams, and big enough for what I'm trying to do? Or it wasn't an option to build on at the time. It wasn't efficient, which is why I was like running back and forth through the van. I'm like, man, if we could just put a door in here, even that part would help. Or I just need some more countertops. So I started breaking down the work system into answering those questions, and then I could make movements and adjustments within that. The biggest thing for me at that time was my where was not set up to be super efficient, so I could make a small changes in this farmhouse. And my who, I needed to attract a few people that could help me accomplish some things. And at the time, it was just an assistant and an accountant. Those were the first two positions that I was able to hire for.
That's really cool because then you open yourself up with time. So time
Yes.
ended up
Right.
being something that you ended up gaining out of that process. And you're still able to produce or even produce more depending on
True.
how you work things out. Now,
Yep.
this goes into an area that I really love because I work in software and we often build systems to be able to work. So one of the areas that I find most difficult when someone's trying to move away from doing it all themselves
Okay.
and bringing somebody else on is maybe they don't have systems in place to be able to do that. How did you come up with those systems, or did you already have them, or was there a way that you ended up actually building those out so that you could bring on an assistant, an accountant, and whomever else you may need for your business?
Sure. So I always say with systems is like and I could tally mark how many times I say it. I say it all the time. You actually, if you're listening right now, you already have some systems for how you're running your family. You just haven't actually decided. And even if they're unhealthy, it's a system. Like,
Right.
you know that every night at 8 p.m. you watch a show or whatever. That's a system. Like, okay, this is what we do at this time. And so it's really like, I want you to already know that you probably already have some systems. They just might not be the best. And so that's when you have the power to adjust them to be like, well, actually, if I did isolate my family and try to create a system, what would it look like? So it probably looks like how you clean up after a meal. It looks like how you do your bedtime routine. It looks like how you do your Saturdays and how you do your Sundays. And chances are you can answer some of those questions right now. So that's a system. So look at that system and go, is this working? Or do I want to make it better? And so that's just what I started doing with each one of those systems. When I zoomed out and looked at that journal, I go, yeah, I don't think that's working for that. So I need to create a better system for how I take care of myself. That too, like you have a few things on there. You're like, okay, well, I know what my skincare routine is, or I know when I do my devotional and all that stuff. Well, write those things down. Write down those bullet things in there. They're like, okay, I think this is my system. Do I like it? Great. Move on. Do I need to make some adjustments in here? Then make the adjustments.
That is really cool because then you can kind of, I think, really take a step back and see kind of how you're living. Because I've been in a place where the things are going on and I just feel like everything's happening to me instead of me actually being in control of what's going on and what's happening at the time.
Yeah. And I would say be careful of the reason I keep asking you is because your system is going to look different than someone else's. And so you need to make the adjustments that work for your family. So when I set up the systems and I have a ton of free downloadables, it still is referring back to you because I can't possibly imagine what it's like to have 6 kids versus my 4, or what it's like to have a special needs kiddo, or what it's like to homeschool on top of it. So each system needs to work for you. And anytime you're being wedged is a terrible word, into a system, they're like, well, they said if I just do it this way, then it will work. Ask yourself, truly though, will that work? So you have to be the one that arranges them.
Yeah, uniquely, we all have kind of our own set of situations, our own set of gifting and who we are, because of course I enjoy talking about purpose and who we are and how we interact with these particular systems in our lives and how we kind of move in and out of them in a particular way. So I'm guessing that as you put these systems in place, that you will build some type of habits or some type
Right.
of automated processes or
For sure.
automated ways of dealing with those. How do those kind of come about based on what you've seen and what you've experienced?
Well, like you said, when you start operating them, it comes to the surface really quick. Which ones are the most broken? You're like, we got to let that one go. So I would say repeat it. I always say once you kind of find a groove in a system, try it for 6 weeks and then interview your family on if it's working or not. Because they will be the first one the kid's like, no, that does not work. I don't like it. Now, obviously, you can push back if you're like, we have to clean the house at one point, buddy. Like, we aren't going to do it. But do you have any suggestions how to make it more efficient or effective? So I would say as you start these systems and the habits, it then is so good. This is the best part, is when you have dialed them in, there's so much less mental bandwidth for figuring out what's for supper. Because you've made that decision by 9 a.m. That's one of my end all be all decisions is like make your food decisions by at least 9 a.m. so that you don't have to think about them all day.
Yeah.
And same thing with your work systems. You're like, oh, it's Tuesday. And on Tuesdays, I do podcast producing and I do writing. So when someone asks me for lunch that day or when someone asks me to fix a purse that day or to run in some thread, I'm like, sorry, my habit is that on Tuesdays it's just podcasting, but I can help you out tomorrow on Wednesday. So
Right.
get these dialed in and then the habits will come and you'll also discover if the habits are not great ones. Because that'll just cause friction. When the habits are good, there's no friction with it.
Ooh, I like that. And there's peace that kind of comes with that,
Oh,
and you're
yes.
kind of able to. I've heard of it. It's called flow. You kind of end up in somewhat
Sure.
of a flow because you've kind of set it up to where you are able to move into that space. Now, I
Yeah.
like something you just said. You said that you end up with the mental bandwidth. I've also heard, for example, I could end up going to work and I could sit in my closet, and because I have so many choices for clothes, I'm having to make this decision. And I've heard people say, well, I just don't do that. I only have like 2 or 3 things I wear. What are some areas that you have found efficiencies of, you talked about the food, and are there any other areas where you have found by kind of making those choices ahead of time, it is giving you time back in your day?
Well, a couple of simple ones. Definitely the food one. We talked about that. Also, this is mostly, well, moms and dads. On Wednesdays is when I do all of my errands. So I do all of my errands for my family, all of my errands for my business. Every single appointment is on a Wednesday. And the reason it helps with mental bandwidth is we all get an email that's like, hey, you got to come in to sign this document for insurance or this document for the bank, or for us, it's farming, or you got to pay whatever. I'm like, that happens on Wednesday. And it was so funny. The other day, my husband's on the phone and he's setting up some bank meeting for the farm. And he goes, it can only be, it can only be Wednesdays because that's the only time I can get Becca to do appointments. And I was like, sweet. So it's mental relief for him because he's like, I
Yes.
got to figure out when I can get back. And he knows like it's got to be on Wednesday. And
Right.
so that it also establishes with all of the kids, they know like if mom has to come in to sign something at school, they tell the nurse or they tell the administrator, like, mom will be in on Wednesday. So that frees up a ton of mental bandwidth right there.
Oh, it also allows you to communicate with your family. And it sounds
Yes.
like you get to kind of provide an expectation list where they know this is how we're going to interact when it comes to time or particular areas of life. Wow,
Yeah.
that's actually
Yeah.
probably a good one to put aside. So everyone, remember,
Pick your day for
you
errands.
pick your day. Then you're
And
not
for
having to do
appointments.
that.
Then
Yeah.
every time someone calls and they're like, hey, can you make the appointment for whatever? You're like, yes, but what Wednesdays do you have available early morning? That's always for my doctor's appointments. I'm like, what Wednesday early morning? Dentist, I need a Wednesday early morning. And then, of course, those are regulated because they already have a system. So your systems are married together. They're like, oh, we always book the Scots for Wednesday mornings. Like it's such a relief.
Makes it a whole lot easier, and then you're not trying to, do a lot of mental dynamics trying to just schedule, because how much time do we actually end up in that space?
And think about what it does for the other system. So we're talking about this is kind of work, kind of home life related, but then I know food for Wednesday better be either in a crock pot, it's already made, but I'm not going to do a skillet meal that night because chances are I've been in appointments or running errands all day. So it helped
Right.
my food system go into place. It helped my family system because they're like, well, mom hasn't been as available today because it's Wednesday.
Right.
Like it just trickles to all the rest of them.
That makes really good sense, which leads me. We've talked a lot about kind of the business and some of the basic things. What about me? I want to know about me. How do you end up in a space where I know typically most people are saying, I don't have enough time for myself.
Right.
I don't have enough time to do any type of self-care. What does your self-care look like? What does that me part of your system looks like? And how have you integrated that into all that you're doing?
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what I'm doing, then I'll tell you two simple hacks for your me system, if you will. Because I would also say this. We already know we're a society of me, 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 me. So some people that are listening do not take care of themselves at all, and we need to get better about it. And some actually are leaning into the world's way of saying, like, you can't serve and help people until you've taken care of yourself. I don't believe that's true either. So I would say for myself personally, I get up at 5 and then I exercise and I call it burpees and Jesus. So I talk to Jesus. I spend a lot of time. I have a beautiful picture of him and we talk to each other. And I do my Bible time after I get everybody on the bus, which is literally 4 different exits in my house every morning. They all live at different times and all the things. So that's a little bit of my me system is that 2 hours every morning where it's to me. Now everybody's going to look different. So I always say, the first thing in your me system is get up before your circus. And whether that's 5 minutes, because some of you in your stage of life, you're like, I can't, like they're already up early, just do 5 minutes. But when you prioritize just 5 minutes that you have said to yourself and your subconscious, I matter and I have some needs as well, then throughout the day, that subconscious will keep taking care of you. Like, hey, you have some needs. So let's go get a drink of water and let's go for a walk. So give yourself 5 minutes or 2 hours and you'll find which is your groove. Maybe it'll be 30 minutes, whatever it is. But somewhere in there, the number one thing for your me system is get up before everybody else. Okay. And then the second thing is pick an evening or pick a time. I'll say pick a time during the week that you call your me time. If that grosses you out to say that word, then call it your pampering time. If that grosses you out, call it your impromptu, whatever you need to call it. But it's a moment, whether it's 30 minutes or 3 hours, that's very you focused. And permission, it may not be alone. So this may mean you love a walk with a girlfriend once a week. You love a bubble bath. That might be alone, but you still may have the teenager who's got to come in and tell you all the things, right? Or maybe it's going out for dinner, or maybe it's reading a book, but that once a week you prioritize a time that is me focused so that you can get a full charge. Those are things that I definitely recommend. For me, then, mine is Tuesday night bath night. And it's so funny because even if we had a volleyball game or basketball or football or whatever the sport is at the time, or rodeo, whatever it is, they know that when we get home, I'm probably not doing bedtime. I'm probably not going to check off their list for school because I am going to take a bath. And by
Right.
prioritizing that, it tells my children, I have 3 of them are daughters, that, hey, I matter too, and mom needs a recharge moment. So that's what I personally do.
Wow. And that actually allows you to show up in all other areas of your life in a bigger, better way. And, a lot of times when we want to serve others, we want to be there for others. It's better to have, I always think of the battery, and sometimes it can show the little meter of whether or not the battery is fully charged or the battery is not.
Yeah.
And when it's fully charged, you're able to really serve everybody else in a greater way.
I always think of it like this, like you saying that makes me think. I always give the cell phone analogy. We are all hyper aware of our charge on our phone. Think how often you look at it. So if you started your phone at 39% in the morning, how long until it dies? It'll be like 11. So if you think of yourself, if you hyper looked at the charge on yourself, would you treat it different? Yeah. Yeah, you
Yes.
fully charge it the night before. So what does that look like? Like maybe it's getting up early so that you can get your full charge on whatever that looks like. But I like that analogy much better than the airplane analogy because I'm like, I don't know, I'd be giving oxygen to my kid in 2 seconds. Like that does not apply to me. Or, you can't pour from an empty cup. True. But then there's no lead up to that. But how do I get a full charge? So it's asking yourself, what does a full charge look like for me personally?
Yeah, and being in that full charge, then you're able to go longer.
Yes.
Yeah, you avoid the just meltdowns, the burnouts, the
Hmm.
places where you just like I can't take it anymore, or
Yeah.
I'll say it takes me way back to the commercial. They say, "Calgon, take me away." We're like, no, like this
Right.
is not where we're going. We are going to make
Hmm.
sure that we intentionally, so intention of course is something that I believe in. I believe that if we all move in intention, and a lot of what you've been talking about guides us in that direction of saying, I'm going to intentionally look at these five
Yes.
systems that I have in my life, and
Hmm.
I'm going to then begin to work on those.
Hmm.
And I believe that as I do that intentionally, then
Hmm.
I start to see these results or these different changes in my
Yes.
life and what I do. So,
Hmm.
is there some special formula that you have out there that we can apply as we move forward?
Yes, well, I've got a ton of resources. If you go to theencouragerpodcast.com and click on the resource tab, that'll be a lot of the downloadables. But the first one is two simple hacks for each system.
Okay.
And guys, when you fill this out, the one that is the hardest to fill out is probably the one that's the most broke, like we talked about. So take a look at that one. But
Hmm.
that's where you could start. I also have a digital course called The Five Systems. That's theencourageracademy.com. And that will get you set up for systems that work for you. Remember, we're directing it. We give you the worksheets, but you're answering it for your stage of life.
Hmm.
And then just keep in mind, you guys, that the systems are always evolving. Right? You're
Yes.
going to find that the bubble bath on Tuesday nights no longer serves you. You want to go out for a walk or you want to talk to a girlfriend. Like they will evolve as you evolve. So keep looking at them objectively and going, is this still working?
Right. How
Yeah.
often do you really do the is this still working? Is this is it a particular time frame, or is it more organic in nature? Because
It can be
that
both.
sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah, it can be both. Sometimes it'll be like, for us in particular this year, our family system changed because we have a senior. And so we're having to apply more time to scholarships in universities and college visits. He wants to play football. So I was like, you know what? This is actually going to take a lot more time than I had originally anticipated. So I started asking other moms who had just had graduates, like, how much extra time? And they're like, it actually takes a lot. And some were like, oh, no, it takes this. So I knew then that that actually organically changed how we're going to do our family system this year.
Right.
And also changed our food system because do you know what it's like to try and feed a 17-year-old football player? So I was like, I have got to adjust my food system to keep this guy fed. And so sometimes it happens organically. And then sometimes I do just review them. Probably, I would say quarterly. I
Yeah.
review them and go, I still don't feel full charge. So
Right.
what's going on mentally or spiritually for me that I don't feel like I'm still operating at 100%?
That's nice, and
Yeah.
it's being aware of that. And I always like in our work with the software, we call
Okay.
a process called agile processing, and part of
Oh.
the process is we iterate to just try and experiment things in our lives. And so in software, we're just trying to build software, so we build little pieces at a time. And we complete it, and then at the end, we always do what we call a retrospective or a lessons learned. And so when you talk about
Oh.
that, I think about that we should probably be doing some type of lessons learned, whatever cadence that is in your life,
Mhm.
just to reflect and say, is this still working for me? So I like that question to say, is this working for me? Is all of the pieces that I'm working on, is it working? And if it's not, then that's when you have an opportunity to
Yeah.
shift or make a change.
Oh,
Not
guys, this
bad.
is awesome. I just came up with I'm like, I'm going to study software companies now because I love learning about systems because I think we operate so good if we have an efficient system. So I'm like, I'm going to start contacting Randy to figure out some more systems.
Yeah, I've found that there are a lot of correlations there, and a lot of correlations in how we probably learn best, because sometimes I think
Mhm.
our education system tells us you got to get everything right up front, but really that's not how life works. Life works in a way where we do many experiments, and you learn the most out of those many experiments. And we often hear all these quotes like, "Oh, you never fail." Like that is true because we're doing experiments. If we're
True.
doing experiments,
Yeah.
then I'm just going on along the path, and I'm gaining more as I go along the path. So
Yeah. It's a different mindset around it. That's valuable. Hmm.
yeah, it kind of provides us that ability. So when we talked about the systems, I kind of think about that and say, oh, this is really good.
Yeah.
So what are some I ask this question to all of my guests.
Okay.
This is what are the 2 to 3 items that you would leave with the audience that they can immediately put into practice, that they can change and begin to transform their lives and produce on purpose?
Oh, zoom out and do a whole week of journaling what you're doing. You can, if you're really detail oriented, go for it, kiddo. If you want to just take note that it's like, okay, well, I spent, but I would journal what you're doing from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, just for 1 week, and journal what you're doing. And then the bonus is journal how long it took you to do it. Then that's just like a time analysis of like what's going on during the week. And then, like I said, the second step then to that would be like, okay, looking at it and highlighting which areas it falls into. That would be a great takeaway right there. And then also just head to my website to get the 2 simple hacks. If you were like, I really relate to this, but I want to find out which one I would work on first, then just download that. That'll help you.
That's awesome. Well, Rebekah, this has been an awesome conversation. I have enjoyed it immensely because I think I've learned a couple of things about all of the different things of life. So we are now in what we call our bird launching phase. Our last child is a senior. And so we're doing some of the college stuff that you're doing as well. And so as we transition, we are finding ourselves looking at our systems. And so we're going to utilize this to help us as we look at our systems. And, we have 2 are closer to adult. They're adults and doing adulting things. And now we have the one that's a senior. So we're going to have to put in some of these systems as we move forward.
Yeah.
How can my audience get in touch with you, connect with you, and learn more about having all these roles in their lives and not getting overwhelmed?
Yeah. First of all, I would also say this too. If this felt like you're like, systems, and that's a gross word, remind yourself on the budget, like if you drag your feet for budgets, but if you've ever done one, you felt so much freedom because all the dollars had a place to go. It's the same thing with systems. When everything has a place where it fits, you feel freedom. So when I'm truly off and I'm just going for a walk on my gravel road, I'm like, this is amazing. So remind yourself of that as well. I have over 300 podcast episodes, so you can listen to me and feel encouraged. It's called The Encourager, available anywhere you listen to podcasts. And then if you go to theencouragerpodcast.com, it has all those resources we talked about, and then also my digital course if you want to take that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Rebekah. This has been really, really awesome. And I encourage everyone, go connect with Rebekah and find out and enjoy and really get those hacks that she's talked about so that we can apply those to our lives. Because, my key is that we all should be able to produce on purpose. That means internally, we should then be able to see the external events of this world versus us trying to work from the outside in out. And we all can then produce on purpose.